Hello, welcome to another episode of the Star Coach Show. It's really great to have you join us. I'm your host, Meg Rentschler, and I'm really excited about the show that we have for you today because it does that very thing that we need to be able to get traction under our wheels and make things happen in our lives the way that we want to. My guest is incredible. She is going to be sharing a framework to help you move dreams into goals, understand the difference of those, and really begin to make things happen in your life. Now, here at the Star Coach Show, I'm all about helping you bring your impact into the world. And my guest, Laura Seybold, is going to be doing exactly that for you today. Laura is the founder and president of Shine Consulting, which is an executive and consulting firm focusing on enabling individuals, teams, and organizations to reach their greatest potential. Laura really understands the impact that leaders have on employee engagement, retention, and organizational culture. So key. I love the work that I do with leaders to do exactly that. So I know exactly where she's coming from. She is passionate about teaching leadership and coaching to leaders so that they can have a more positive impact and influence on their teams, on their cultures, on their organizations. Laura is the host of Leadership Rediscovered, which is a podcast that I have had the pleasure of being a guest on, and I'll put those links in our show notes for today's episode, where on her podcast, she interviews different leaders from industries all over to share the lessons they've learned about leadership. Now, in today's show, we're diving into the concept of goals. How do we move from wishing or dreaming to actually putting some shoes on our goals, making them happen, moving them forward? And we're going to look at her B star framework to make that happen. So, with no further ado, let me introduce you to Laura Seybold. Laura Seybold, welcome to the Star Coach Show.
Thank you, Meg. I am so excited to be here.
I love spending time with you. I had the honor of being on your podcast,
Yes,
Rediscovering Leadership,
yes,
a
which
couple
you do an
months ago.
amazing job. Yes.
Well, and you have an amazing show. So a plug
Thank
here for
you.
Rediscovering Leadership podcast.
Thank you.
And you actually found me. This is one of the things that lights me. It always lights me up when people reach out to me because they found me on the Star Coach Show. And
Yes.
so you found me on the Star Coach Show.
Thank
Then
you.
we started talking about the work that you're doing, and I came on your podcast and I thought,
Yes.
let's put the work that you're doing in front of people as well because it's so important. So, we're going to be
Yes.
talking today about the differences between goal setting and dreaming, sort of wishing it.
Mhm. Yes.
And what the difference can be in our lives when we get clear about those differences and take some of the actions that we're going to be talking about today towards kind of getting in the driver's seat of your own life. I
Yes.
don't know about you, Laura, but too often when I like slow down and look, I like, who's making the decisions in my life right now? I'm
Yes.
responding to everybody's demands. Do these fit with what
Mhm.
my goals are? So I think we'll probably lean into some of that stuff today.
I love that. I'm so excited. Thank you.
So what was it that lit you up about this kind of work with the
Yeah.
people that you work with?
Good question. So, and it's interesting because I have a lot of corporate clients and I focus a lot on leadership. That's a big area of my practice and my specialization. But to me, effectively setting and achieving goals is a form of self-leadership. And I feel pretty passionately about the fact that you can't lead other people well if you don't know how to lead yourself well. And one of the many aspects I think of self-leadership is that very important process of just establishing what are my priorities, what am I here to do, and then how do I go about accomplishing those things. And I was a big dreamer growing up. My dad is an engineer, so that's a really tough combination because every day I would have some big idea of, hey, dad, we should do this. Hey, dad, we should do that. And mom too, but she was a lot more open to the dreams. And my dad would very quickly point out, well, here's why we can't do that. And here's why that's a no. And this is how this isn't going to work. And so it was always a battle of the wills growing
Right.
up. And again, I had big dreams. I had big things that I wanted to accomplish in life. And starting things was really easy for me personally. I always had a knack for coming up with these ideas and then, all right, let's just get going on them. But then I would lose steam and I wasn't good about finishing things. And my mom she would get very frustrated with me because she'd be like, Laura, there's piles of different things in the house. My parents couldn't afford a dining room set, so they turned their dining room into a playroom for us kids, which was great. I liked that way better than a formal dining room. So
Yes, exactly.
yeah, but she would say, there's a half finished painting over here and there's Play-Doh over here. I mean, she would be so frustrated and she'd say, can't you just start one thing and then finish it? And so I think they'll say about entrepreneurs, a lot of people start businesses just to scratch their own itch or a problem that they've had. And I really became pretty knowledgeable about dreams and goals and how you go about accomplishing them because it wasn't an easy thing for me to turn a dream into a goal and then actually finish it.
So a couple things you said there that I just want to highlight. First of all, I think that there's this balance. No dissing your dad because he was like
Yeah.
kind of looking at that. But I think, you had this enthusiasm and this like energy towards
Yes.
the spirit of new things and possibility. And because of the way he kind of looked at things and more of maybe that black and white, one of the things that I heard as a strength for you coming through that was your perseverance. Because
Yes.
even though dad was like, Laura, that ain't going to work because of this or that. And I'm sure, definitely there was probably many things he was spot on about, but that
Yes.
didn't seem to diminish this drive that you had. Yet somewhere along the way, it sounds like it clicked that it's got to go from a dream that's half finished and the
Yes.
excitement of beginning is
Right.
carries me through completion. And
Yes.
so where was it in your life that it sort of you realized, okay, I'm a dreamer, but I
Yeah.
really want to be somebody who can set goals and
A
complete goals.
doer.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
doer.
So, first of all, I do have to acknowledge that's a great point that you made. And I actually, now hindsight being 2020, I consider it a gift that my dad was like that growing up. I was incredibly frustrated by it as a child. But honestly, at this point, I am so grateful for it because hearing no all the time did create some perseverance in me. And it also allowed me to use, because I was a very creative child, it allowed me to use that creativity to just come up with different options of, okay, if I can't do this, then can I do this? And it really impacted me even from a career perspective. I really did not accept no very well as an answer because people would come to me, I would try to challenge the status quo on certain processes or policies, and people would say, oh, we can't do that. I worked in HR, so we're good at saying no as well. Oh, you can't do that. And I'd be like, well, why not? And can we try this? Or how about this? Nothing illegal or unethical, of course, but within those
At
boundary
least not on the
lines.
podcast.
Right. I know. No, I was good about that. But I'm a Midwesterner, Meg. You know this. We
Yeah,
are bound
we
by
are Midwestern
integrity.
girls. Yes,
We
we
have
are.
values. Yes. But yeah, I mean, it really did shape me and help me. And when I didn't have that, so as an adult, I didn't have my dad so much telling me no. And actually, I think that's where some of my challenges came in with finishing things because I would get these big ideas and I would just, go off to the races and have all this energy. And then there was nobody there to say, oh, but this might happen, or, oh, look out for this. And
Or
I
clean
would,
up
like
your
I said,
Play-Doh. Yeah.
absolutely. No one was really there to ground me anymore. So I had, free license to act. And so at any rate, I think again, having those big dreams, when I went into adulthood, I got excited about the fact that, okay, now I can go after all these things, right? That nobody's going to tell me no anymore. And it was a struggle for me though, to figure out, how do I turn those dreams into actionable goals? And I think for a long time, I would use the term dream and goal interchangeably. And I think a lot of people think about them as one and the same, but
Hmm.
they're really not the same thing. You can't actually achieve a dream. You can only realize a dream. And the way you do that is through a goal and through the actions that you take. And so that's a huge differentiator. And there's more, but huge
Well, but
differentiator
that
between
is
dreams and
because
goals.
think of, we can dream and visualize and
Yes.
at some point there's got to be some traction to that, right? Some rubber to the
Hmm.
road. Um
Absolutely.
and so that's a key differentiator as we begin this talk about the difference between dreams and goals. And thanks so much for sharing sort of your journey.
Yeah.
Um where do you think we need to start as we set the stage for the difference between dreams and goals?
Yeah, great question. So the way I like to think about them is, dreams inspire goals. Dreams are the initial vision, the initial motivation. And a lot of times I'll say I'm using dream language if I say something like, wouldn't it be nice to dot dot dot, I live in West Virginia. I don't love cold weather. It's a little bit chilly here in the wintertime. And so I will often, especially this time of year, say things like, gosh, wouldn't it be nice to have a little place in Florida to escape to every once in a while? And oh, how nice would it be to have the sunshine and the warm weather? But that's something I've been saying for 5 years. That's a dream. And Walt Disney is really famous for saying, if you can dream it, you can do it. And that's true. I believe that. But the problem is, there's actually quite a gap between dreaming and doing. And we know Walt Disney, of course, was a dreamer. He had these big ideas and all these things that he wanted to create. But if they had just stayed up here, we
Right.
wouldn't have Disney World. We wouldn't have Mickey Mouse. We wouldn't have so many things that we have right now. If he had never put those ideas on paper, taken
Right.
steps to actually make them happen. So when we're using language like someday I'd like to, or wouldn't it be nice to, and those a lot of times are more of the dream type dreams that we have in our
Hmm.
mind, and they can be very powerful, and it is what gets us started. But we can't stop there, because
Right.
you can't will them into existence, even no matter how powerful your mind is. Because I am a pretty visual person, but you can't actually, I can get really close to feeling like I'm in Florida, but I'm not there.
So that's a beautiful differentiator. And then if we were, so I think you've painted a good picture of what dreams are. Let's talk about goals. What is a
Yeah.
goal?
Absolutely. So again, dreams are kind of like your blueprint that you create for something, and then the goal would be the construction team that builds it. And so when we think about goals, that's where we start putting the action in. You said kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? You've got to get some traction. You have to actually make some commitments. There's usually sacrifices of some kind related with goals. It could be time, it could be money, it could be other types of resources. And quite frankly, I think that's why a lot of times people stay in the dream state, because it's cheap, it's free, it's easy. I can just, sit on my couch and think about Florida. I don't have to actually spend the money to buy anything there, right?
Hmm.
So when we get to that goal stage, we're actually setting an actionable plan for how we are going to accomplish that inspiration, that thing that has inspired that want and that desire that we have. And there's a lot of goal setting models out there. I have a goal setting model too that I use, but in my mind, one of the first steps is, once you actually identify those things that are very important to you, those dreams, then the next step is figuring out, okay, how do I turn those into a goal that I can take action on and then get across the finish line and actually complete it, not just start it, but finish it.
But actually completed.
Actually finish it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and we know that there's different personality types, and there are
Yes.
people who are creatives who tend to kind of like that idea and like to be able to hand it off to somebody else to finish,
Yes.
which is certainly something you might consider, but often you have to have money to be able to do that, to
Right.
hire somebody to kind of complete it or be a part of a team.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk today sort of how do you create that plan forward if you're
Yes.
a one man band, or if you're,
Yes.
or if you want to see something through to the end. And
Yes.
what I love about Laura's model is that it has the word star in it. And
It
we all
does
know
have
that we're
stars.
stars here, right? So, so Laura is going to share her B star framework with us,
Yes. Yes.
and think about a goal maybe that you're working
Mm-hmm.
toward, or that one of those dreams that you've had that might want to turn into a goal. I just smiled while
Yes.
you were talking about this, these dreams that we've had.
Mm-hmm.
We had, my husband and I had a vision to move from this house after my youngest son graduated from high school,
Yes.
and move somewhere else, and within Texas.
Yes.
But anyway, long story short, my
Different
son
house, right?
graduated from high school in 2016. He has now graduated from college and has been in the workforce for a couple years.
Uh-huh.
However, this vision, right? Like, so we had this dream.
You had a
First, we were
dream.
looking
Yeah.
around at different, how we would go online, we would look at houses, we would go
Mm-hmm.
on open houses. And my dream was to build the house, and Dan's dream was not. So first it took several years for me to get him onto my dream path. And
Yes.
yes,
We don't always share the dreams.
the same day. So we had to work on that. And
Yes.
then, and now we've actually like bought our land and are building our
Oh,
house and all those things.
see?
But it does take work. So then it
Yes.
becomes, how are we going to finance this? And are we going to
Right.
see the same kinds of design goals? Because I have one of those husbands who actually cares about the design. I'm like, why are you a husband who cares?
Oh.
No, I'm just joking. So it's all good. But point being, when you were talking about that vision, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
literally, we had that dream
Mm-hmm.
for years.
Yes.
And yet, I think that some of the things you're going to talk about were things that we we wanted to. There was no fire. We didn't have to move. We wanted to
Mm-hmm.
move, so it was worth kind of creating some of these steps that we're going to talk about to be sure that what we did was what we wanted. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. When I was listening to you talk, I had to take off my coaching hat because I wanted to be like, well, what was holding you back, Meg? So we won't go there, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. And again, it can be a real challenge for people. And we'll talk about in the model one of the things that may have been holding you back related to time. So if you want, I can walk through. Do you want to walk through
yeah,
the B star
yeah,
model
we'll
right now?
do
Okay.
it.
Very good. See, it is called B star because in order to be a star and successfully turn your dreams into goals that you can achieve, you have to first start by putting them into a goal. And I have to be honest, I just assumed goal setting was something that most people knew how to do, were very effective at it. And through my research, I've come to find out, no, actually, there aren't a lot of people that are really comfortable and confident in goal setting. And so, again, there's a lot of great goal setting models out there. I felt like they were all lacking something. And so that's why I created my own. So just another one
I
to
love
throw
it.
into the mix. Yeah. So of course, I'm biased towards mine, but I would just love for someone to use a goal setting model because I do think that framework is helpful. So the B for the B star model stands for believable. And this is one of those things that I do think is really missing from a lot of goal setting models. And it's, do you believe that you can actually achieve your goal? And I think when people first hear that, they're like, duh, obviously, why would I set a goal that I didn't think I could achieve? But you'd be surprised, right?
Right.
There's a
And
lot
it's
of people.
it's
Oh,
not,
go ahead.
it's like the underneath thing. It's not like just from your
Yes,
cognitions, do you believe, but do you
exactly.
believe? Because
Yes.
it's those belief systems that will undermine your
Mhm.
thought system.
Absolutely. And I think about it in a couple of different ways. Number one, sometimes we set what I call should goals. So it's not things that we really want, but it's things we feel we should do. So, like, I should lose 20 pounds, or I should go back to school. I used to have people on my team that would come to me when I was in the corporate world and they say, I think I'd like to get my MBA. And I'm like, okay. And I have my MBA. So I think they assumed that I was going to be like, this is the best idea I've ever heard, to go get it. But I would challenge people. Well, what's interesting to you about an MBA, and what are your motivations, and what are you trying to get out of it? And so, is this something that you're really committed to? Do you believe? Because that's a long process, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're bought into that and you sign up for it, hey, it's maybe 1, 2, 2.5 years, depending on what program you're in. So you have to really want it. And when I think about these should goals, a lot of times it's just things, maybe other people put on us, society puts on us, families put on us, and things that we should be doing. And when we
Mm-hmm.
peel that back, you're right, Meg, underneath it all, it's like, do I even really want to do this? Or is it just
Right.
somebody else putting things on me? And that's more personal goals. But even if you think about it in an organizational context, think about in a company, a lot of work type goals are just cascaded down. So if I don't have a lot of agency over a goal, that maybe my boss just says, these are your goals for this year for
Right.
performance purposes, I may not believe that I can achieve the goals I've been given either. And something that I think is somewhat depressing about goal research is that the odds of us achieving a goal that we've just thought up in our mind are about 8%, which is terrible. I mean, I'm not a
Yeah.
gambling woman, but I definitely wouldn't take those odds any day. And so if you're already not, don't really have a lot of support or steps set in place for you to be
Right.
successful, not believing that you can even achieve the goal in the first place is not going to certainly lend to greater success in achieving it. And so I think it's important I use it as a filter before you even go through the rest of the model, to just start there and say, do I believe that I can achieve this goal? And how do I know? How do I know that I can achieve it? And so that gets you in touch with the subconscious or less conscious part of yourself. So you got to start there. And
Absolutely.
if the answer is no, then don't keep going. Stay there, do some self-coaching, or have someone talk you through why is it that you don't believe before you even finish the goal setting.
Because one of the things that comes up for me, as you talked about, is the whole concept of motivation. So,
Yes.
belief and motivation, how committed am
Mhm.
I? Is it extrinsic motivation, which doesn't tend to
Yes.
carry us very far? Are we internally motivated? And
Yes.
how can we, like you said, don't go to the E if
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
let's stay at the B
Stay there.
and not
Yeah.
go to the S unless we
Yeah.
know that it's really believable. And
Yeah.
there
That
we
I
can do
really.
that could be some great work, internal work to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think one of the greatest gifts of going through the coaching process for me is all the self-coaching that I do now, because anytime I notice something in myself, I'm like, well, I wonder what's driving that feeling that I'm having right now. It's a great side effect of going through coaching training. And, hopefully other people benefit from my coaching training, but I know I've benefited from a lot of self-coaching. So
Love that.
but so that's the B. And then assuming that, yes, you do believe that you can achieve your goal, then you would move to the S. And the S stands for specific. And that's found in any good goal model as a specific goal. But it's important because a lot of times people set really vague goals for themselves, and it's hard
Mhm.
to measure, and it's hard to know if you've achieved it or not. And so I always like to say, if you can answer the very simple questions of the who, what, when, where, why, how, then your goal is probably specific. And again, that's super helpful in terms of being able to track your success and keep the momentum going as you're approaching the finish line with your goal. So the S is pretty standard, but an important piece of it. And then
Well,
T
and actually,
stands for,
before
oh,
you
go
move
ahead.
past the S, one
Yeah.
of the things that don't think we give our brains enough credit for is that if you can really see it and answer those questions, your brain will
Yes.
begin to work on, okay, so I'm going to make
Yeah.
it happen. But if it's
Yeah.
vague, it's like whatever. I mean, it's like your brain,
Mhm.
you're taking away from the possibility of your brain helping you, even in your sleep,
Yes.
begin to create that path forward if you're vague. It's
Yes.
really difficult to
That's
make to
such a
any
good point.
vagueness.
Yeah, and again, trying to get traction, and it's super, super hard. I use this finish line analogy a lot when I talk about goals. And I think a lot of times when I know when I picture the finish line of a race, I always think about a foot race. And it's the image I like to think of is just someone, going along a very flat, easy road, running, going through the tape, which I have run races before, but I've never been the first one to finish. So I don't know what that feels like. I imagine it feels great. But the reality is, it's more of one of those tough mudder type races. There's going to be different obstacles coming your way. It's not easy. It's not an easy, straight, flat road. And so the more things we can do to set ourselves up for success, the better. And so, yeah, being specific is a huge component of that, because you're right, Meg. The more you can really get specific and clear about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, then you are activating those parts of your brain, even when you're not really thinking about it and consciously aware of it. So that's huge.
Excellent. So we have
Yeah.
B. So is it
Good to
believable?
be. Yep.
S, is it specific?
Specific. Yeah. And then T is time bound. And so I'm going to go back to the example that you shared, because as we know, having a deadline creates more of a sense of urgency for us. So you were talking about the house search and
Right.
deciding, what are we going to do? Are we going to build? Are we going to buy? But you really didn't have any sort of compelling
Well, our
situation going
compelling
on.
situation went away. So our
Yeah.
compelling situation was that my husband had a horrible commute to work. So as soon as the boys got done with school and we
Oh,
didn't need to be in the city anymore, we were going to move to where he worked. However, we couldn't find exactly what we wanted and he was putting up with that commute. And then COVID happened. And then suddenly he didn't have a long commute
yeah,
anymore
work from
because
home.
he's
Yeah.
now in the other room. So that
Yeah.
way took away that. You're right. It took away that whole time bound. We got to get there. We got to save his
Yes.
commute. It was like the house is paid off and it's a perfectly nice house. And,
Yeah.
so then it was strictly because we wanted to, which you can totally put off till
Yes,
forever.
forever, right? And that's okay. I think sometimes people think I'm a little extreme about goals and, you got to go after your dreams and everything. And it's just because I do feel like there's so many people that have these big dreams and big ideas, but they're just afraid, or there's other excuses that get in the way, and they think, "Oh, I'll
Excuses.
do
Yeah.
that someday. I'll do that someday." And I think if we haven't learned anything else from COVID, then the lesson of life is short, and we don't
Hmm.
know when we'll have someday, if someday is an option for us. And so that is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this, is that, a lot of times we don't feel that fire, and we do have a tendency, and I'm guilty of this, days turn into weeks, weeks turns into months, months turn into years. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, oh my gosh, where did my life just go? It goes like this
It
so
does go
fast.
like this. Plus, if you talk
Yeah.
about things for too long and never do anything, people are like, "Yeah, right. You're
Yeah, yeah,
both both
yeah.
of our best friends, couples, they both have already moved in that period of time
Oh
since
my
we,
gosh, that is too funny. You're like,
it's
oh
too
yeah,
funny.
they
Yeah.
moved. Yeah.
Meg
So
and Dan
that's
are going to move.
fine.
Yeah, Meg and Dan are going to
Yeah,
move
sure.
one
They've been
day.
saying
Yeah.
that for 4 years, or for 10 years. But
10 years. Yeah.
yeah, it's so true. And so again, people, I think from a work context, we don't always love deadlines, but honestly, we're very motivated by deadlines, and it does help light a little fire underneath us. I know I have this thing that I have to do today, and so
Mm-hmm.
here's all the steps I have to take to make it happen. And there are some people that work better under deadlines as well. I mean, that having even self-imposed deadlines sometimes helps, because they like that pressure. So the time factor is really, really important, of actually setting a date of when you want to accomplish this goal. And depending on the length of time that goal is going to take, I also recommend putting in little milestones along the way, especially if it's a
Super.
long-term goal.
Yeah.
So
Chunk it down. Yeah.
yeah. I'll give you an example that probably is relevant for your listeners. So after I went through my coaching training, I decided I did want to get ICF certified and go through that whole process. And so just, starting at the ACC level. So I knew when I wanted to take my test, and I knew that I had to have 100 paid coaching hours,
Mhm.
between the date that I was starting and when I wanted to sit for that exam. And so I remember thinking, well, I've been tracking my hours because I knew that was important, but I never actually totaled them to see how many hours I'd completed. And so I was like, oh, I probably have 30, 40 hours at this point. And I added them up and it was 8. And I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to get 100 hours between now and I think March was the date I had for myself. And so knowing that information, then I was able to sit down and say, okay, I just took how the difference, right? How many hours I needed versus how many I had. And then I divided it out by how many weeks existed. And it came down to, I want to say 3 hours a week. And I knew I had to do 3 hours of coaching a week. And that really put me on a path for success, because then at the end of each week, I could just look and say, did I get 3 hours or not? And if, let's say, I only had 2, then I would tell myself next week, you have to have 4 to stay on track.
Mhm.
And I think it's such a simple example, but there's a lot of times where we just think, oh, it's fine. Or I feel like I've
Right.
had a lot of coaching conversations. And then if I had waited until
Yes.
February to look and realize, oh, I'm short 60 hours, I couldn't have met the goal that I had set for myself. So not only setting that deadline, but then also setting milestones along the way is super, super helpful to keep momentum going and to make sure that
Right.
you're on track to actually finishing your goal. So that
And
time
begin
piece
to
is
make it
really
feel
important.
doable too, right? Make it feel like,
Absolutely.
oh my gosh, now it's that consistency to the goal.
Yes. Yeah. You start building it into your routine. You start prioritizing it. You start scheduling things. Well, I know I have to do this. So it has to be a priority on my calendar this week, as opposed to like, I'll get to that someday. Totally different, right?
Well, and it's totally like those things do get because other people will put their expectations on your calendar. They will
Yes.
the squeakiest wheel gets it. And if you're not your own squeakiest wheel,
Mhm.
then you are these things important or do they keep getting and I'm very guilty of
Oh,
pushing
yeah.
my goals out as other things
Yeah.
come. Oh yeah, well I'll get to that later.
Yeah, I'll get to that later. This person really needs something or they need me, and I want to be of service to them. And so, I'll just do that later, which later usually for me is never. Good intent, but yeah, doesn't happen. So that time piece is really, really important. And then the A is it stands for accountable. And this is a huge, if you look at the goal setting and goal finishing research, this is something that I don't think is talked about nearly enough. So ATD did a study many years ago where they came up with how you can improve the odds of achieving a goal. And what they found is that you have a 95% chance of achieving a goal if you have a regularly scheduled accountability appointment with somebody
Wow.
else. Yeah, 95%.
Wow.
Yeah, and I don't feel like enough people are talking about this because this is huge. And I'm going to be the first one to tell you I am not a very disciplined person, so I know there are folks who are probably really good at holding themselves accountable personally. I'm not one of those people. And so this is another reason why this is so important is when you're thinking through your goal, it's a matter of how am I either going to hold myself accountable or how am I going to put measures in place to be held accountable to this goal. And I think coaching can be hugely helpful here. This is one of the things I love about coaching is the built-in accountability that comes with
Mhm.
it. I think back to at a period of my life, I had a personal trainer. I mean, it was literally paying someone to help me achieve my fitness goals and my health goals, really. And every day when I went there, the first thing I had to do was step on a scale, and he would ask me, what did you eat since the last time you were here? I mean, there was pretty strong accountability, and I was paying for that. So I was not going to, every time I went to, put a piece of cake in my mouth, I thought, oh, I gotta go
I
deal with
gotta
my personal
tell, I
trainer.
gotta tell
Yeah.
him that I had this chocolate cake.
Exactly. Weight Watchers. My gosh, I don't know if they still do this anymore, but they used to have those weigh-ins where you would, have those groups that you were part of, and you would go weigh in. That's a massive accountability system built
Right.
in for people, because it's like you knew that was coming up. And so I think from an organizational or a corporate setting, a work perspective, there are a lot of built-in accountability systems in place. So you think
Mm-hmm.
about project status update meetings that people have to go to, having a boss, typically that person is holding us accountable for things, performance evaluations. There's just a lot of check-ins and reports that we have to do when we're employed by somebody else, that for the purposes of holding us accountable. But when it comes to our personal goals, we don't always have as many of
Mm-hmm.
those systems built in. And so I think this is something that people really need to be mindful of. And again, you can pay to have someone hold you accountable, or you can find someone else who maybe has a similar goal to you, and you
Mm-hmm.
can agree to hold each other accountable. And
Accountable.
here's what that looks like. And again, I think I'll give you another example. I said I used to run, I don't anymore, but I used to run half marathons. Now, first of all, the training plans for half marathons those are built in accountability systems too, because it's very prescriptive. And anyone who's ever done one of those knows that if you don't do what you're supposed to do in a week, then the next week you're going to pay for it. So that encourages you to stay on the plan. But in addition to that, I had a friend that was my running buddy. And every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, we would run together. And she had small children. I had a small son at the time. And I would actually go to her house and leave my son with her children and her husband. And then my friend and I would go run. And I can't tell you how many days I did not feel like running. And if it was just up to me, I totally would have said, oh, I'm not running today. I'll do it tomorrow, or, some other day. But I kept thinking, oh, there's Liz sitting in her house waiting for me to come over there, and her girls want to see my son and play with
Mm-hmm.
him, and I would show up for her every time. And the reality is that we are far more inclined to show up
Mm-hmm.
for others and than we are for ourselves. We don't want to let other people down. We'll let ourselves down before
Right.
we'll let somebody else down. So that accountability piece is huge. And again,
Huge.
something that I think is missing from some other goal setting models and other ways of thinking about achieving goals.
Well, and I would just ask all of you, if anybody's listening saying, yeah, but it's a personal, I don't want anybody to know about my goal. I guess my
Mm,
question to you would be, what's the underlying commitment to that? Do you not want anybody to know so that they hold you accountable because you're not really
yeah.
committed to that? I mean, I
Yeah.
would
Do you
just,
not believe
I
that you can achieve it?
exactly. Does it go back to the B that you just don't
Yes.
believe, or that you don't, it's if it, oh, I don't want to tell anybody because what if I don't? Well, then I would say that you probably need to go back to your B.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's another good self-coaching moment, right? Of what
Mhm.
is it about this goal that I'm not comfortable talking about publicly? Because that is one of the first steps to get yourself from an 8% success rate, is to write it down, to say it publicly. The more
Right.
people you say it to and you put it out there, it's like, oh, I can't come back. If I commit on your show to all your listeners that I am buying a second home in Florida, now I have all these people that know that I've put this
Mm.
out there, right? And they might,
Right.
hey Laura, you said that you were going to do this, and so you're much more inclined to actually pursue it and make it happen.
When I was going to start the Star Coach show, I had thought it took me a long time to get my wheels under me to get started.
Oh,
And it got so that my kids were in middle school, high school at the time, and
uh-huh.
they were like, "Yeah, mom, your podcast, wink, wink, wink," because I would say it out loud, and
Uh-huh.
and I wasn't putting anything with it, so it almost got embarrassing
Yeah.
to say it out loud, and then it got, I'll show them kind of thing, like
Yes.
I'm gonna, so it became a motivator also. But I can't blame them because they were like, yeah, that
Yeah,
podcast you've
we've
been talking
heard
about for
that.
like a year.
Yeah, but you did it, and thank goodness that you did. Because think about, I mean, again, Meg, you know, I'm a big fan of yours. I can't tell you how much I have learned from you and from your guests on this show. And so I think about the ripple effect of that, right? That other coaches, other people who are listening to, leaders, or, you know, wherever walks of life they come from, the benefit that they've gotten. And if you had just continued to say, oh, someday I'm going to have a podcast, someday, you know, none of us would be sitting here right now getting the
So
benefit.
thank goodness for teenagers who wink at you and roll their
Yeah,
eyes because it was a
yeah,
motivator.
it was a
Love that. So
motivator.
let's
Yeah,
let's review the be
yeah,
believable.
believable.
S, is it specific enough to help you
Yep.
get the traction, to get your brain on board
Yeah.
with you?
And that's where you're putting
Is
the
it time
plan
bound?
together. Yes.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
by when is super important.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's just going to be next week and next week and the week
Perpetual.
after.
Mm-hmm.
How are you holding yourself accountable? Do you have an accountability buddy?
Yes,
And then
exactly.
what's the R?
Yeah, well, you just talked about motivation. And so that was a perfect segue into the R, because the R stands for rewarding. And sometimes I feel like you could actually, after you do the B, you could flip to the R, because that is where you really get in touch with, why are you doing this in the first place? As I mentioned earlier, goals require typically some level of investment, some level of sacrifice, time, money, other resources. And so in our brain, you know, our brain does not like to do things it doesn't get rewarded for.
Oh, no, it does not.
So what is the reward? What am I going to get out of this? And when I talk about rewarding, I always like to say I'm talking about a big R and a little r. So the big R is the overall why. It's truly the source of the motivation. What are you going to gain? What are you going to benefit from achieving this goal? Why is it so important and worth the sacrifice that you'll probably have to put into it? And you may have walked through that yourself. You know, why am I going down this road of having a podcast? Is it really that important? Do I really want to do this? You know, walking through all those questions. What am I going to get out of this? What, maybe for you, it was the fulfillment of knowing you're helping other people. You know, I'm not sure, but there was something about it that was
Right.
rewarding to you, or you would not have pursued it in the first place.
Right. It was
So
super
that's,
important to me to give back to the coaching community, to
yeah,
create a resource.
yeah. And then when people like me come to you and say this was so helpful, it just, you know, it's like that little
Yeah.
gold star you get. Oh yes, that was what I was trying to do, right? So that's the big, the high level motivation of why you're doing it. That's the big R. And then the little R is really goes back to the time bound piece. If you're setting any sort of milestones, how are you going to reward yourself along the way? Because we do not have infinite willpower, and it can be really hard to stay on track, especially if these are long-term goals. It's so easy to be like, you know what, like, let's not build a house. Like, this house is fine. Let's just stay where we are. You know, it's not so bad. We all have those moments, right? Of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I don't know if it's really worth it. But if you set little rewards in place for yourself, and everybody's different in terms of what they find rewarding or motivating, but if you can set these little rewards in place for yourself, you know, every time you hit that little milestone, you get that, whatever that gold star is for
Right.
yourself, that's going to help keep you going. Because again, I think we can have these really important aspirational goals that really could make a huge difference, but that doesn't mean they're easy. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to get thrown off track along the way. So finding those opportunities to build some rewards for yourself, and better yet, you know, if you have an accountability partner, you compare those two together. Hey, how can we reward ourselves? I know people that have gone through the Finish It program that I have. I've had accountability partners that are still years later, 2, 3, 4 years later, they're still each other's accountability partners, and they like to go to dinner together. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just one of the things that they do that's fun and it's rewarding for them. And it helps keep them going on their goals as well. So just, you know, figuring out what everybody's different in terms of how they're wired, but the rewards are really, really important of why are you doing this in the first place?
And we know that to be true for our clients. So
Yes.
are we applying that same thing to ourselves? How often do we
Yes.
like, oh yeah, I would do that with my client and then forget that that also could apply to ourselves?
Absolutely. I think we don't celebrate enough as humans. We don't acknowledge success enough. I think a lot of times we're just like on to the next thing, right? Like, oh yeah,
Mhm.
I got that done. I got that certification, or I lost those 20 pounds. Now on to the next thing. It's like, wait a
Right.
second. Let's really acknowledge. And I try to do that for my coaching clients. Like, hold on a second, take a step back. Let's pause
Yeah.
here. You just accomplished something really big and you're just like, on to the next thing. I'm like, let's take a moment to just acknowledge, wow, you did it. And it was hard and you got through it and here you are. So I think we're just not wired to do a really great job of celebrating success anyway. And so that's another reason why I think it's important to really think about rewards and what's most rewarding about this goal.
So good. So now, you have this framework, and you
Yes.
know through the research that you've done that dreams do not equal goals. You really want to
Yes.
help people set goals so that they get the things in their lives that they're looking for.
Yes.
Would you mind if we spent just a few minutes? I know that our time is, but I just would love, because you're a great example of how we as a coach can see a need, and then how do we create a program to
Oh,
meet
yes.
that need. So would you be
Yes.
willing to share just a little bit about, like, how did you put together then your program that helps
Yeah.
connect what you know to be true with what people need and offer it?
Yeah, great question. So this was actually the first thing that I ever did in my business that was my very own thing, which was really scary, I will say. Very vulnerable when you kind of put your own material out there. But I created a program called Finish It. And again, I thought maybe I was just someone who struggled with finishing things, but that maybe other people had it all figured out and they were just, better,
All these people who are
smarter.
meeting all their goals out there.
Yeah, exactly. And
Where
then there was
are
just
they? Yeah.
me. Yeah, like I don't know. I thought I was the clueless one. And then the more I started reading, because again, I was trying to figure out how to get better. So then I went through a lot of research on my own around, okay, how can I make this a less exhausting, painful, frustrating process for me? And then when I started looking at the data and those statistics around the odds of achieving a goal that you just think up in your mind are 8%, I was like, well, wait a second. Then that tells me other people might be struggling with this as well. And in particular, I do have a passion for women, for moms who I feel like a lot of times are a group of people who have a tendency to put their own dreams on the back burner in service for other
Yes,
people. And I see it a
exactly.
lot, time and time again. It's like, well, I'll do that when the kids are out of the house. I'll do that when the kids are grown. It's the someday goals, right?
Right.
And it just broke my heart because my mom ended up being a stay-at-home mom, 3 kids, and she sacrificed everything for us. And unfortunately, she's in a place right now where her health is very poor, and it's because of decisions she made back when we were children, things that she didn't do to take care of herself. She sacrificed her own health for, what she thought was being a good mom, and she was a great mom. But
Mhm.
I think if she could have hit the fast
Right.
forward button and seen what
Right.
her life was going to be like at age 75, she probably would have made some different choices. And we would want that for her as well. And so
Right.
I have a passion for anyone turning their dreams into goals and getting them across the finish line. But especially, I do find a lot of times it also happens to be women or moms who have a
Mhm.
tendency to put those things on the back burner. And so I created a workshop that initially was geared just towards women, and it was focused on talking about the differences between dreams and goals. What is a good goal? So created the B-Star model. We went through that. Then we talked about what are all the things that get in the way of us achieving our goals. We took a deep dive through things like fear, habits, just other day-to-day things that get in the way. And the way I set up the program is that each person that went through it, they would actually come out of the program with an accountability partner from the workshop. And so
So
it was,
they learned and kind of did some group stuff in the
yes,
workshops? Okay.
lots of group stuff. Yeah, I really wanted to build a very supportive community where people weren't just trying to do this on their own, that they could talk and have conversations and say, "Hey, I'm struggling here. This wasn't a good week for me. I got really off track." And so it was a great program. I launched it during COVID, so it was virtual because that was all you could do. Nobody could meet in person anyway. And so I designed it to be all virtual led. And again, this was the first thing I ever did in my business. So it actually forced me to put a lot of my business elements in place because it was like, okay, we'll have this program. How am I going to communicate the program? Well, I guess I need a website. I need a social media presence, so I kind of had to put a lot of
Mhm.
things in place for my business in order to actually launch the program. And I'll be honest, it's been a struggle for me to find people, the right people, to get
Mhm.
people focused on it. Again, if someone's not really motivated to take care of themselves, they're not as inclined. It's the
Right.
people that need the program, right? But they're not as
Right.
inclined to sign up for it. So I've had a lot of learnings over the years of how do I get to people who I think this could really benefit? And that was the motivation at the end of the day. Just like you starting the Star Coach Show, my motivation was I just want to help people who have these big dreams or little
Mhm.
dreams. It doesn't matter how
Mhm.
big or small they are, things that are important to them. I don't want those to stay up here. I
Right.
want to help them actually achieve those dreams by turning them into goals. And so that was really the whole concept. And again, I designed it all virtually, put all the content together and facilitated it, created a Facebook community where people could, stay connected with
Mhm.
each other. And I've had a lot of iterations of the program since then. So where it is now, I've run it as a retreat, which was really powerful, I will say,
Right, I
very
bet it was.
powerful. I still have people talking about it, and that was a couple years ago. But I started to think about, well, a retreat is not really accessible to all people. Maybe they can't afford to take the time away, or maybe they literally financially can't afford a retreat. So I turned it into an on-demand masterclass where I created videos and people can just sign up and take it on their own. Now, the downside of that is they don't have the built-in accountability partner because they're taking it solo. But you can get a small group together,
Right.
and just
Right.
like you would do a book club or something of that nature, you could still create that. It's just a little bit more responsibility on you to do it. But so I created a lower price point option and but made it more accessible that way to people. And then I still have a live virtual program as well that people can come into if they want, and then one-on-one coaching as well. If someone would just rather, hey, I just want to talk, you mentioned earlier, maybe someone's not comfortable really publicly
Right.
sharing their goals.
Mhm.
Okay, we have ethics and integrity that we're bound by as coaches,
Right.
so we can have a very private, confidential conversation about your goal, and we can work specifically on that. And I have a few coaches that have gone through this program that I say are finish it certified, that
Mhm.
can provide that one-on-one coaching as well. So I went into a lot of detail on that, but more so because I hope it's helpful if there's
That's
anyone
what
listening
I
that
like that
wants
you
to
kind
do
of
a
started
program.
with. I had the idea.
Yeah.
I knew what I wanted to share, but what I love and I really want people to think about because I work with hundreds of coaches a year and I will tell you that
Mhm.
that concept of how do I get my content or what is it, how is it that I'm doing
Yeah.
it? Your path was so helpful and I started this way. I
Yep.
had to I had to have a place to be able to give the content. I had to have a place to
Right.
be able to advertise it. I had to have a place to be able to draw people in.
Yes.
And then every time you've done it, you've tweaked it a little bit. And
Yes.
now you have it sort of tiered where it's a lower
Yeah.
price entry point if you want to do it all online. I
Yeah.
can imagine some people might do it all online and then think, I want to do the in person one. I'm going to do it again, but I want to do it in person. Or some people
Yeah.
might start in the in person and think, you know what, I want to sustain this with the online one.
Yeah.
But what I love that people are hearing is that you were able to take something that you're passionate about,
Yes.
put it in a form that serves people, and
Yes.
that you continue to kind of tweak it and move it along. And that's what I really
Yeah.
wanted people to be able to hear. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to the engineering dad, if it's a no, you just figure out, okay, I've had a lot of failures along the way. But to me, I don't really think of it as a failure. It's just a learning opportunity of, okay,
Right.
just try it, put it out there, see what happens, learn from it, and then make the adjustments. Okay, that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. What can I take from this and
Mhm.
try again? But I think the important thing is just doing it and just trying it and believing that it is content, because I still have those moments where someone will say, this is life changing. And I kind of like roll my eyes. I'm like, it's really not, like, it's goal setting. It's not life changing, but for them it is. And
Well, and
so,
it is if you think about your own research. People
yes,
are not doing this. Therefore, they're
no,
not meeting those goals that are life-changing for them. So if you
yes.
are helping them meet those goals that are life-changing, yes, it's life-changing.
And sometimes I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever. And I think we all do that, where we're like, my
Right.
content's not that special. What I have to
Right.
say is not that important or not that. And that's not true. It may not be for you. It may be something that you take for granted because it's a strength for you.
Right.
But don't assume it's a strength for other people, or don't assume that just because you struggled with it, nobody else has struggled with it. You can
Right.
help other people from the lessons that you've learned. So I think that's
So,
that's a
so good.
huge piece of it.
So this program is available. We are going to have links in the show
Yes.
notes for this show so that you can connect with Laura. You can learn about the things that she's doing. You can connect with her podcast.
Oh, thanks,
Laura, thank
Meg.
you so much for joining me in today's
Thank
show.
you. I am so honored. I do not see myself at the caliber of your guest. So thanks for, lowering the bar for me to come
Oh,
here.
stop it.
I'm so thrilled. This is so wonderful. Thank you, Meg.
Thank you. And once again, connect with the links for Laura in the show notes for this episode.
Thank you.
Now, I know that interview went a little longer than I normally have, but Laura had so many good things to share that I didn't want to stop. I hope you got as much out of that interview as I did. If you want to know more about Laura, the program she runs, the things she's doing in the world, be sure to check out the notes either below this video if you're watching us on YouTube, or at the show notes, starcoachshow.com/382. starcoachshow.com/382. My conversation with Laura continues in the Star Coach community, where we do incredible things. Not only do we have a library full of bite-sized wisdom specifically to help you enroll clients, build your business, build your skills, so many things. We also do 4 live events every single month to help you get your questions answered, see coaching demos, explore with stars from this very show, expert advice with Q&A, so many things. I can't even tell you all, but I do encourage you to explore what's available at starcoachshow.com/community. starcoachshow.com/community. Join us. There's a seat waiting just for you. Now, as always, wherever you listen, please subscribe so you never miss a moment of the incredible information that's brought through the Star Coach Show. And until next week, this is Meg Rentschler wishing you the very best for your success. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and we'll see you next week.